I discovered robo-tripping during a job interview. If you want to hear about that craziness for the next few minutes, then my name is James, and here we go. So first off, what's robo-tripping? Well, it's when you take too much Robitussin cough syrup and you start feeling euphoric and you trip. I don't recommend it. It's not all that great for you. Please read and follow the instructions on your cold medicines and any other medications that you take. You could hurt yourself or someone else, okay? So with that out of the way, let's get back to our story. This happened about 29 years ago. And at the time I had lost my job and I got sick around exactly the same time. And it was a bummer because I had to find another job fast. I was low on cash. I needed something now. So I get on the job boards, and this is back in the 90s when you would send your resume to an email address and an actual person would read it. It was amazing. So I was actually getting calls back. Plus, it was the 90s. There were jobs everywhere, especially in North Texas where I was. And I was in the computer business. I started out on the tech support lines, and by this time I was ready to get off the tech support lines, get away from the customers, take my career to the next level. And so that's kind of what I was going for here. I was aiming for the big fish while I was still desperate to get a job. But I started lining up interviews, and there was this one that was very interested, a little bit startup kind of company. And it sounded very interesting. So I decided, hey, I'm going to go for that. And I canceled this other job interview to go to that one. That'll be important in a minute or a few minutes. So I was still sick. I wasn't improving. I wasn't getting worse, but I wasn't getting any better. And I scheduled a job interview for a couple of days out. So the morning arrives. I take my last dose of cough medicine, and I'm thinking, okay, I'll just get some on the way to the store or on the way to the job interview. I stopped by the grocery store, got my little snack, a nice cold drink. It was probably like one of those iced tea things or whatever. And I got my Robitussin cough syrup. I get out to the car. I have my, eat my little snack. I have my cold drink. Take a swig of cough syrup. Just, set it aside. Let's start driving. Now, I left early so I could have plenty of time for this stuff to take effect on the way. Plus, my, earlier morning dose was wearing off and I needed something now. And so I decided to keep going down the road, start coughing, take another swig. Now, this job, it was like a half-hour away drive from my house or apartment. And I had to take this one highway down to another highway across the north side of Dallas and up this other highway up towards, Richardson area. There was a lot of high-tech stuff going on there. And along the way, I take a few more swigs after coughing. By the time I get to my exit, I've had several swigs of cough syrup, and I'm still coughing a little bit, but I'm thinking, okay, I'm arriving early. I can compose myself in the car and go in, right? So I get there, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I need another dose. And I look at the bottle, and I'm like, oh, crap. It's nearly half gone. It's a pretty good sized bottle. I'm thinking, well, that's really going to cure my cough. So I compose myself and start making my way in. And this building I'm going in is like, the whole atmosphere of the whole thing was really kind of weird to me. But the building looked like it was built in the 70s. It was like this dark brick, interesting brickwork. The entryway was like this glass that went up like, I think it was 3 floors. And you walk in, and this entry area is 3 floors high. There was a staircase in the middle of it with a water feature, plants. It was humid in there. And then despite all the skylights and the tall windows, it was dark in there because they were all tinted. I guess back in the 70s, early 80s, whenever this building was built, they loved these tinted windows and dark brick and this darkness. And it was crazy. It was kind of like weird and whatever. And so I get to the office where this place is, and it was on the first floor, just almost right inside. I walk in, greet the receptionist, and the lobby is not much different from the lobby of the office I was in was not much different from the building atrium when you walk in. And it was kind of dark and looked like most of the furniture in there was from like the late 70s or early 80s. It was that look, lots of brown and earth tones and square shapes on the furniture. And the chair I had to sit in, filling out some paperwork, was like, sitting in low in it, and the arms are kind of up high. It would have been great for watching TV, but it was terrible for filling out paperwork right before a job interview while you got a fever and you're sweating profusely and trying to hide a cough. So I get the paperwork filled out and handed in. That was quite a struggle doing that, and then sitting there and trying to not cough, trying to not sweat, and trying to stay cool. And about, I forget, 10 or so minutes later, or several minutes later, they're finally ready for me, and this young man greets me and brings me back through these hallways of, the carpet looked like it was from the late 70s or early 80s. And of course, this was the mid to late 90s. And so it was starting to get outdated and everything. It looks like, they just found the cheapest office space they could find in this area right off the highway. And it was kind of hastily put together. You could tell it was a new company. And we walk into this conference room, but it looked like about 2 weeks earlier it had been a storage room. It was a large room with a double door, but there was no carpet on the floor. It was bare concrete. The walls hadn't been painted, and there was like a couple of folding tables, set up in the middle of the room with some folding chairs around it. And then there was another table with a couple of computers on it, a folding table up against the wall, and some corporate art up on the walls and some fake plants in the corners. So we sit down, and there was this young lady that was there. She was, I guess, waiting for us. I don't remember her walking out. I remember walking in, she was sitting there, and she stood up to, shake my hand, and we sit down and say our niceties and get on with the interview. And by this time I've noticed I'm feeling a little better. So we do a little back and forth, and, I'm telling them about myself and everything else, and we start getting into the nitty gritty. And suddenly I feel this whoosh come over me, and I start feeling good. Like, wow. I get this dumb grin on my face. Just, oh boy. My brain starts going, you have to get out of here now. I'm in flight mode. I'm starting to panic. And I'm starting to not really understand what they're saying. I can hear the words coming out of their mouth, but in my panic, I can't understand a thing. So, in my panic, I stand up. I reach out my hand, and I'm like, nice to meet you guys. Thanks for having me, but I gotta go. And they're like, the looks on their faces are like, okay. So the young guy ushers me out to the reception area, and I, say, "Hey, see you later," to the receptionist, and I walk out to the lobby atrium area, and on the opposite wall, right in front of me, is the building directory. The company that I canceled the interview with was in that building upstairs. I see the name of the company, and I'm like, I would have been a shoo-in for that job. And I canceled that interview, and I go outside and I look at the building address outside on the outside of the building, and I look at my notes because I have my notebook with me as I'm walking towards my car, and I see the address, and it's the same. And that's the name of the company. And each time I send a resume, I write a page in my notebook of the name of the company, what they did, the job description, whether or not I sent all my notes. And I'm looking at it. It's like canceled interview. And I thought for a second, maybe I should slink back into the building and go up there and say, "Hey, I'm sorry I canceled that interview today. It was for that day. In fact, it would have been an hour after the other interview. So I could have just gone out to my car, composed myself, walked back into that building, got myself a job." So the things I learned, number one, if you're sick, take care of yourself. Stay home, get some rest. I should have just kept firing out resumes and see what I can get and try to get as well as I can before going out and interviewing. But yeah, take care of yourself. And number two, keep your commitments. If you make a commitment, but then you decide, oh, I'm going to cancel this because this thing looks sexier, I'm going to, try to aim high and, whatever. No, keep your commitments. I could have had a job that day. In fact, I think it was like another couple of weeks before I found something, and it wasn't that great of a job. If I would have kept that commitment, I wouldn't have been in such a panic. I wouldn't have had to go to my grandfather and buy money to pay rent that month. And another important thing is I was actually kind of proud of myself in that interview that I stood up and walked out. Sometimes when something's not going very well, cut your losses, get out. So that's my story of how I discovered robo-tripping during a job interview. So there you go.